Hello, Internet, and welcome to episode 174 of the Assorted Calibers podcast, the Second Amendment podcast that has a little bit for everyone. I'm David, and with me, as always, is my hostess, the quackingest duck in the pond, Weerdington Elizabeth Beer'd. How you doing today, Weer'd?
This seems so strange.
Is it surreal?
But I'm a pretty princess.
And you have the straw to prove it.
Yes. And yeah. Erin is not feeling well, so she decided to take a powder for this one, and that is fine. And hopefully she is feeling better soon. And also we have another pretty princess here. Hello, Oddball.
I'm not entirely certain what I'm doing here. Who are you people? Why am I tied to this chair?
I mean, neither of us have just... David and I were trying to start, and have been trying to start for an hour and a half now. And then Oddball said, "Oh, I wonder what's going on in here."
And, well, no, we were trying to start for an hour, then Oddball came in, and that was the last half hour.
Mm-hmm.
You have to give him credit.
But yes, I am back from my vacation. I didn't spend any of the vacation in a burn ward, though maybe I should have, because despite how much you reapply sunscreen, if you've managed to go through what was a really wet summer, and a summer where I didn't do a whole heck of a lot with your shirt on the entire time, and then suddenly spent 10 hours in the ocean with a very exuberant 8-year-old, then yeah, you burn up real good. I believe the sunscreen saved me from blistering. So instead of, so it was just one icky night and a couple of icky days. And when I got gate raped on the way home from North Carolina, it was very uncomfortable with those hands gliding across my back and chest. Ugh. And but now
you love it.
Now I'm just itchy.
Well, that's what happens when you have unprotected TSA.
That is true. I don't even know how you protect yourself from TSA minus flamethrowers.
Drive.
Yes, that's true. I have done that, but I was going to drive to North Carolina. I'm too old for that crap.
It's not that far. Oh, that's right. You're still in the East.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what have you been up to, David?
To get to North Carolina, it's about 2 hours. Well, this past weekend, on Sunday, we went to the East Tennessee Medieval Fair.
Ooh.
My wife and I are longtime Rennies, so when we go properly. We go in garb, because if you go in your normal everyday clothes, they perform for you.
Mm-hmm. If
you go in garb, you're part of the show. They play, which is much better.
This is true.
So we went. It's a small show. This is their 6th year, I believe, and we've been there for, well, it would have been 4 of them, but 2020 happened.
Yeah.
But it's small, but it's growing, and they've got a good group of people. They've got some repeat vendors. They've always got some new vendors, and they do a nice joust, and not much more you can ask for a Ren fair.
Did you eat a turkey leg?
I did not eat a turkey leg. I'm not a big fan of the turkey legs at fair because they're usually very dry.
Mm.
I did have a brisket sandwich because they had a food truck there that did brisket and pulled pork, and because Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a funnel cake because it's a fair.
You guys have funnel cakes down there. I don't know the full map of funnel cake versus fried dough.
We have, yes.
Yeah, fried funnel cake. Basically, it's the name says it all. They fill up a funnel and they swirl it in, and there you go. Fried dough is usually, from my understanding, is more poured from like a cup or a ladle.
Yeah, it's just a disc of dough that is dropped into hot fat.
Yep. Whereas this is literally the stringy bit that makes it.
But I think it's pretty much the same concoction.
Oh, it's the same dough. It's just the presentation.
And then, of course, funnel cake is then covered with powdered sugar that makes it impossible to eat and stay clean.
Oh, yeah.
That's part of the fun.
Yes, the whole point of eating either funnel cake or fried dough is to come out on the other side looking like you sneezed in your cocaine.
Well, funnel cake is traditionally just powdered sugar. Fried dough, usually they'll have a variety of preserves and such.
Well, in New England, it's cinnamon and sugar.
Yeah, we're talking about the... Hey-o.
Oh, you say it one more time, David. It got swallowed by Discord.
Yeah, but that's the Northeast. We were talking about the real world.
Maine is the real world.
Is it? Is it though?
Okay. Can you get to Maine by car to continental U.S.?
Yes, you have to drive through Canada.
That is not the continental U.S. Yeah. So no matter from Maine to get to the United States, you have to go through a foreign country, either Canada or New York.
Or you could go through the near shore by boat.
Again,
and you will still be over continental crust. I have taken many oceanography classes.
Yes, but I specifically said car to keep you out of the ocean.
All right, but Maine's still awesome. And New Hampshire is the awesomeness.
Maine and New Hampshire they are definitely behind the Iron Curtain.
That's true.
Vermont used to be behind the Iron Curtain, but they have lowered their own recently.
Yeah, now it is the Iron Curtain.
I mean, it's not the minefield of New York, but we'll get to that shortly.
So, Oddball, how you been?
Pretty good. Spent the weekend mostly working on my 3D printers, trying to get new things installed and get them back up and running and all that fun stuff.
So you're making stuff on the 3D printers, but you're not making segments.
Yeah.
Oh, poor
Oddball, you should do an entire segment on printing giggle switches. just how many felonies can I make in a 36-hour time frame with my printers?
But I don't want the ATF to show up, give me a dog, and then shoot it.
Valid point. For legal reasons, this is for educational purposes only. Do not try this at home. I didn't.
Put a dog collar on one of your cats that says Fido.
No.
I know.
Print out a dog.
Filled with angry Play-Doh.
Yes.
Speaking of angry Play-Doh, did you hear about what happened in Virginia?
No. Oh, yes, I did. A very similar incident happened in Logan Airport about 10 years ago.
Oh yeah.
David, why don't you lead into this?
So, I don't remember what county it was, but in Virginia, one of the school districts allowed the CIA, I believe it was, or FBI. Can't remember off the top of my head. But anyway, one of the federal law enforcement agencies to do some training using their vehicles.
It was FBI.
It was FBI. Okay, I couldn't remember which one of the two. I figured if it was more likely to be FBI, because if it was CIA, they would have just planted some drugs on the bus. But anyway, yes, for anyone CIA who's listening to this right this moment as we record, that was a joke. Good to go. Anyway, so the FBI did their training, and then like a week to 10 days later, they were doing maintenance on one of the buses and found a clay-like substance under the hood on the engine of one of the buses. It was angry Play-Doh, or probably the training equivalent of angry Play-Doh. I don't think
No.
No, it was the real stuff, according to the
It was real angry Play-Doh, because I'd heard both.
That's the whole point to this is you need to use real C4 for these exercises, because otherwise the dogs and the detecting devices don't work.
See, I thought that they used some type of plastic clay or whatever with chemicals added so it smelled right.
Nope.
I didn't.
They use legit C4. They just don't put any detonators on it. So
right,
it's actually really damn safe in that instance. But
the only way without a detonator, the only way that you can get that stuff to blow up is to light it on fire and then contain it immediately in very tight containment, because then just like a gunpowder in a rifle barrel.
But there was a
yeah, they left live C4 in a school bus for over a week, and the FBI never noticed that they were missing a lump of C4 until the school district reported it.
Yeah, the story was that they got, like, there was a hunk of C4 under the hood of the bus, and they got most of it, but apparently a chunk of it broke off or whatnot and fell into the engine compartment somewhere.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, good times.
I don't know if that's better or worse than when they were doing a training exercise. I don't know if it was the TSA or what they were doing, but they were doing a training exercise in Logan Airport, and essentially the red team was attempting to smuggle C4 onto the tarmac of Logan Airport. And when they got onto the tarmac undetected, they went, "Ha ha! Look, we got it!" And they said, "Oh yeah,
where'd you the C4?"
Yeah, and they went and looked for it, and it wasn't there. And I
do remember somebody reporting with the TSA that a few years ago, when they attempted the penetration tests, the TSA failed like 90-something% of penetration tests.
Oh yeah.
Well, they just did another batch earlier this year, and they only failed 70-odd%.
Mm-hmm.
So they improved by 20%. Or you could look at it as they're still missing close to 3/4.
Yep.
Thank you, Patriot.
Yep. So yeah,
and expansion and renewal of the Patriot. For that, it was only bad when the other guys.
Yeah, they don't really want to give it up.
Well, no, it's power. Why would they give up power? Come on, power.
All right,
max power.
Well, shall we dive into the main topic?
Sure.
Yeah, let's do that.
Let's dive into the main topic.
I was literally.
It's always good to have another string in your bow.
Let me tell you, this is a true story.
Wow, you're not even going to respond to my play on words there? You're going to let that pass?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Wow.
Oddball. Make Oddball do it.
Can't make Oddball do anything.
My lack of segments has proven that.
Do I look like I have a frying pan?
Oh, but yes, if we want to take that as a segue into one of the stories of the main topic, which would be that there was a mass shooting in Norway recently.
There was.
Yes, country with some of the toughest gun control in Europe.
How would they manage to have a spree shooting? And this is the FBI definition of spree shooting in Norway when they have such strict gun control.
He used a bow, which, interestingly enough, I was looking into a little bit, and bows are apparently even more tightly controlled than guns.
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Yes.
You know what? I didn't even look into that. I just assumed that in most of the United States, like a bow and arrow, you could just walk into Walmart and buy one.
I mean, you can walk into the woods and make one if you have some basic skill.
Exactly.
Right.
But nope. In Norway, it is easier to get a shotgun for hunting than it is to get a bow.
Crazy. I did not know this. Well, I mean,
that just makes it even better, doesn't it?
I've got to say, I hate to, again, all my heart goes out to all the people harmed in this attack, but literally it was come Thursday, I'm sitting on the beach and I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to talk about for the main topic. And I've been watching like YouTube videos and all that, and, in my, just in downtime. And I just kind of expected the stories to just come to me. And I went, oh man, geez, I haven't been reading the Reload. Maybe I should go see what Stephen Kachalsky's stirred up and all that.
Or go look at the Primary Arms website.
Yeah, maybe. No, I'm not going to do that. But
you're welcome, Ryan.
Some people get that joke. But I was just like one of those oh man, I'm actually going to have to start actively hunting. And I kind of had a little panic attack on I'm on vacation. I was kind of hoping to just not do any work for the podcast and just naturally be ready for podcast when I got home. And I'm like, oh man, I might actually have to start doing a little research
I might actually have to work.
Exactly, on my vacation. And suddenly my phone beeped. There was a spree killing with a bow and arrow in Norway.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, horrible situation for the families affected. Doesn't matter what their family members were killed with. They lost family members. That's always needs to be the first and biggest takeaway, is people were needlessly killed. However, there's also the aspect that they had no option for defense.
Correct. They had no option for defense besides relying on the police, which were A, unarmed, and B, are now currently under scrutiny because according to these reports that I'm reading here, and honestly speaking, this is still a fairly new story. We're outside of the 48-hour bubble where it's just anything we say could be completely wrong. But according to this, the police encountered the guy at 6:13 in the evening, and they took cover and called for backup. And before they could engage him, and of course they were unarmed, before they could engage him, he had gone off, and then he killed 5 people, and I think he wounded a few more.
Yep.
With a few more before he was finally apprehended and he was taken alive at 6:47. So doing the math, that is 34 minutes.
Yeah.
Where this guy was completely unfettered and nothing else.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
But the police knew he was there.
Yeah, the police, according to a police timeline, this is from the article. According to a police timeline, the first information on the attack was logged at 6:13, and he was caught at 6:47. That's the 34-minute window. According to the police officials, the first officers on the scene observed the suspect but took cover and called for reinforcements, and arrows were fired at them, and then he got away. That was when he killed the 5 victims and injured, doesn't say how many here, but injured a number of others. And then the police who did not carry firearms were able to get access to their firearms, and they were unarmed during the first encounter, armed later, and he surrendered. So he was also, the attacker was known to the police.
Yes.
He was interviewed in both 2015 and 2017 to determine if he posed a threat. The following year, 2018, the police agency contacted Norwegian health authorities and concluded he suffered from a serious mental illness. The agency thought he might carry out a low-scale attack with simple means. That was what was reported in a newspaper at that time. So, and of course they have to toss in suspicion that the suspect's apparent mental illness caused the attack had strengthened further, while Anderson's statement of being a convert to Islam has become a less important investigation line. He himself has said that he has converted to Islam. It's a hypothesis, but it's also a hypothesis that he hasn't done so. So he says he's converted to Islam, but we don't believe him. 3 weapons, including the bow and arrows, were used in the attack. Declined to identify the weapons further or reveal how the 5 victims were killed due to the ongoing investigation.
And as a ballistics nerd, I will point out that while essentially bullets, either rifle or pistol, are essentially blunt impact weapons, they do pierce, but they pierce by crushing. Very similar to if you were to hit somebody with a claw hammer, the head of that claw hammer might create a puncture wound.
More like the peen of a ball peen hammer.
Exactly. But yeah, they press their way through tissue and armor and other things like that. Meanwhile, a broadhead arrow is a cutting implement. It is an edged weapon.
We don't know if they were broadheads. They could have just been target arrows, which still have something of a point.
Yeah.
And also keep in mind that, let's say, compare it to a 9mm pistol, average bullet weight of 124 grains. That's less than just the head of that broadhead arrow that Weer'd mentioned. A target point is going to be lighter, but you put the entire mass of the arrow behind it. Yes, velocity is lower, but a compound bow, say a 70-pound pull compound bow, you're getting some good velocity out of that. And at close range, that is a devastating.
And again, it's using a different mechanism of action with the if it is a broadhead, that's true. I'm trying to see. There was a lot of news reports talking about arrows sticking out of the sides of buildings. Sounds like this guy was shooting a lot. But
he apparently had a large supply of arrows, at least a score of arrows.
Mm-hmm. But I'm not seeing a ton of pictures. I'm just doing a quick image search for the event of the arrows, so I can't see what the tips are. There's one very, very blurry picture where I can't even see fletching on this alleged arrow. So I don't know what he used, but if he did use broadheads, it's just like with a knife. It's not like your knife is going, even 750 feet per second when you stab somebody.
Right.
It just needs to be pressed. So
yeah. And I was just looking it up. I looked up an energy calculator for a bow, and it has arrow weight in grains, a number between 250 and 750. So 250 grains is 45 Colt bullet weight for the heavier bullets. Arrow speed, feet per second, 100 and 450 feet per second. According to this, a hunting arrow is about 330 for a 70-pound draw. So let's punch that in. So 330 feet per second. We'll go with the lower weight arrow, pardon me. So 250 grain arrow at 330 feet per second is 60 and a half foot-pounds. So, compared to a bullet that's very low, but still.
Well, and also, as Weer'd said, if he was using broadheads, not only is that a lot more mass, those things will leave a wide wound.
Oh, yeah. Yep. But that's why I was going with, for a hunting bow, kind of a moderate velocity.
Right, yeah.
And I went with the lowest weight, assuming target arrows. Mm-hmm. If we up that to, say, 500 grains, which is right in the middle of that, then we're looking at 120 foot-pounds. A 500 grain arrow at 330 feet per second, 120 foot-pounds. It's also interesting, it says that arrow weight at that speed, it says, this rig throws heavy arrows, and with a strong fixed-blade broadhead, it will work on any game animal on the planet.
Wow.
Yeah. Yep.
So yeah, this brings the Michael Bain quote of "You are on your own" to very, very grave points. Is the police were there, the police were on scene, and still,
however, they were not armed because guns are bad. Yep. Okay,
and neither were any of the victims because guns are bad. So all of these things banned, and like you said, you can just make these things from stones and sticks and bird feathers and things like that.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of folks online that make them out of PVC piping.
Oh yeah. At its basic level, a functional bow does not have to be complicated or expensive.
Nope.
As you get up in sophistication, a compound bow, yes, it does need to be a certain level of sophistication, which adds to the expense. That's a given.
Mm-hmm.
But a basic bow, straight bow, a recurve is going to be more complicated as well, but a straight bow is still powerful enough to cause some significant.
Yeah, there's a reason why bow and arrow of one form or another was a primitive weapon pretty much across the globe.
Yeah. Yep. Basically, every single culture had some version of it.
And it was a major factor both in hunting and war until not just the advent of gunpowder, but when firearms actually started becoming a developed thing more than just a cannon on a stick or what have you.
Yeah.
Because even then, the bow was still faster to fire. You could get the repeat shots.
As
Right.
the French learned at Agincourt.
Very very similar to in World War I, where or even World War II, where someone would step down from a full power rifle for a submachine gun because they could get that high rate of fire in a portable weapon.
Yep, where crossbows were more powerful but slower fire.
So yeah, this is just
Tragic.
an instance of why gun control doesn't work. Again, you can keep trying to take away, and it'll just simply change the dynamic of bad people doing bad things. Or you can just accept that there's going to be bad people doing bad things and let the good people have their guns so they can protect themselves.
Yep. And on a related note to that, with gun control, somebody posted this image, and I'll put it in Discord so everyone can see it. But it's a photograph of a 3D printed lower with magazine, and I was told the magazine was also 3D printed, but not the spring, and a basic Mac style upper, which is fairly readily available. And
Right.
the text says, the lower took about 3 days to print and 350 grams of filament. The finishing assembly took about 3 hours, mostly because of me forgetting how much I hate building my own AR trigger group. Cassette trigger groups for the win, but they don't fit in printed builds. Well, depends on them. Really, the hardest part was getting the upper. Regardless, function checks with snap caps and everything looks solid. So really, how are you going to stop me?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. You can tell when a file drops for a new 3D printed lower, because all of a sudden the upper and the locking block and all of the bits that you
Any
have
accessory
to
parts.
you have to buy for that particular model gun or whatnot, all of a sudden become a lot more scarce and a lot more expensive.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And nobody in the community is at all surprised that that's what's happening. It's only people who are outside of the community that seem to be surprised.
Yeah, it's kind of like there's actually now a market for all the parts except for the frame for a high point. And you might actually spend more just buying the parts than you would buying a high point, because people are printing the frames and wanting to attach, the slide and the barrel and the springs and all that.
Yep. And this is nothing new. I mean, I'm sure that you guys are familiar with Philip Luty. Weer'd?
Refresh my memory.
English anti-gun control activist, made a homemade firearm and made manuals for instructions.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, charged with illegal arms construction in the late 90s, sentenced to 4 years in prison. Other investigations ongoing at the time of his death. I'll put a link in the show notes for Mr. Luty.
And I will say, yes, those manuals are still floating around the internet. No, I won't tell you where to get them.
You can find them. And that was 20 plus years ago, and his design is literally a hardware store. Go to a hardware store, you get you get his manual, you go to a hardware store, and guess what? You've got everything you need to make a fully automatic magazine-fed 9mm submachine gun. You just need some basic machine tools to.
Yep. And speaking of England.
Yes, I thought that would be a nice lead-in for you.
Like I said, I was like, oh, there's nothing I'm going to talk about on the show, and then we had this attack in Norway, and then also there was an attack on England, which I felt dovetailed nicely into the idea of these places that not only have strict gun control but also strict knife control. And a member of Parliament, David Amos, I believe is how he pronounced his name. He was stabbed to death as he was in a church meeting with his constituents.
Yep. And once again, police have declared the crime a terrorist incident and said they are investigating a potential motivation linked to Islamist extremism, which I'm sure they will set aside.
Yeah, this perpetrator was the son of, I believe, the ambassador from Kenya, and Somalia, and so he was I believe born in the UK, but
a British national of Somali descent who had been referred to prevent the official counter-terrorist scheme for those thought to be at risk of radicalization.
So so not only is, we've got a guy using a bow and arrow, to which you guys pointed out is more heavily regulated than guns. I did not realize that.
Until I saw the story and did a little research, I did not know that either. I made the same assumption that, well, it's a bow and arrow. Of course, it's going to be easier to access. And no, it was not.
But anybody who's been listening to ACP or really just have their eyes open or spend any time on Twitter will know how heavily the UK has restricted knife ownership, so much that they are locking people up for carrying spoons and scissors and screwdrivers. And so the idea that not only are you banning guns, but you're also banning knives, and this man is dead.
Yep. And next week it'll be sharp sticks.
So again, my heart goes out to the family. I'm not, I mean, there's nothing the victim could have done in this instance. I mean, even in America, there's not really much, because he's meeting with constituents. He's letting people get close to talk to him and ask questions.
Hey, Gabby Giffords. And
so this is all, I mean, it's just senseless. But again, the key point is with this guy, if he had known that other people in the church might have been carrying a gun, would he have gone through? Again, this guy was also taken alive.
Yeah.
So what would there be a deterrent factor on just the threat that there might be people armed with guns there?
Yeah. Now, in that article about the British MP who was stabbed, there was a chart of attacks against British MPs going back to 1979. It's only about 9 or so people on the list. Some killed, some wounded, and 1, 2, 3, 4 of those, so half of them were IRA or INLA.
I'm actually kind of surprised that only half of them were.
Yeah, and one of them was actually in South Belfast, shot by IRA Commando 81. 79 was London car bomb, and then another car bomb, 8 wounded. In 2000, Andrew Pennington was killed in a samurai sword attack. And then 2010, Stephen Timms was wounded, stabbed in the stomach. 2016, Joe Cox was shot and stabbed, killed. And then just a few days ago, David Amis was stabbed to death. So even going back over a decade, it was still stabbings, not counting IRA terrorists with bombs. The tools are never the issue. People are always the issue. And evil people are going to do evil things. And what is the saying? Making the innocent helpless will not make the evil harmless, or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
So the Jeff Cooper quote you may be looking for is that an unarmed man can only flee from evil, and fleeing from evil will never defeat it. So yeah, this is, again, there's no way you can ban your way out of this. Again, these are all attacks with restricted weapons. I was aware of the gun control in both Norway and England, and I'm aware of England's knife control laws. I was not aware of the Norwegian bow control laws, and all of that for essentially nothing. So it's just the moral of the story is gun control is terrible. I mean, weapon control, the right of the people.
Weapon control, yeah,
exactly. And
whatever the arms are.
yeah, the difference, even if it was a light bow that was used in Norway, an 80-year-old grandmother with arthritis is not going to be able to draw and shoot that, but she sure may be able to shoot a Glock. So,
considering the number of students that I have who are women in their 70s and 80s, absolutely.
Yeah.
Hey, MMP easy.
Oh, exactly. And then furthermore, we have guns that are designed for people with lower grip strength. So,
yep.
So that this is
the market will provide.
Mm-hmm. So that's
now,
that.
I'm going to transition to a local positive because this is just depressing. So here in Tennessee, clicked on the wrong. Here in Tennessee, state lawmakers are having a special session to roll back Tennessee's COVID-19 restrictions, and apparently the House Republicans want nothing to be off limits, curtailing the governor's emergency power, restricting private businesses' ability to mandate vaccination, holding businesses liable for damages, for firing people who won't get vaccinated. I mean, there's some stuff that I've kind of got mixed feelings out, but the primary purpose of the government is to protect the liberties of the people. That's number one purpose. Well, okay, the number one purpose of the government is to make money by whatever means necessary and consolidate power. But that's not the intent. That's just the reality. But yeah, it's really positive. Punish businesses for adverse actions against employees for their vaccination status. Another one, employees could be held liable for harm or injury suffered by an employee because of any vaccination mandates or incentives. Lawmakers also discussed employees' unemployment benefits relative to COVID-19. So part of the bill would allow employees to keep receiving unemployment benefits if they quit their job because of vaccination mandates. That one I think would be a little bit more challenging because they have to rewrite part of unemployment laws. But anyway, so it's all tied to something else that's going on, which has to do with West Tennessee and the opening of the Ford. What did they call that? But Ford is opening a massive facility.
Oh, yeah, an assembly plant, I think, for electric trucks.
The electric vehicles. It's like 36,000 acres and is expected to generate $5.2 billion in revenue for Ford. Thousands of permanent jobs, more thousands of temporary jobs. It's, Tennessee is becoming the automotive and firearm mecca of the South.
I mean, it really is, especially now with Smith & Wesson moving there.
Yep, and we're hoping we can attract some more.
Yep, and
because they tend to go where they're wanted, and B, where they can get good employees.
Yep, and GM has a pretty sizable plant south of me, and
Volkswagen,
Nissan's. What's that?
Isn't Volkswagen around there too somewhere?
Volkswagen is down around Chattanooga, and
so south of me.
Nissan's U.S. headquarters is not terribly far from me as well.
Yep. And then, of course, we've got soon Smith & Wesson, we've got Beretta, we've got Barrett. There was another one, not a firearms manufacturer, but a firearm accessories manufacturer that either did or is moving Tennessee. We were talking about that one not too long ago. So, hey, you guys don't want them up in the Northeast. We'll be happy to take them here.
Yeah. So that's good.
Oh, and also not Tennessee's particularly, but Remington basically is moving everything but the museum and the custom shop to Arkansas, I believe, where the ammunition plant is. They expanded that dramatically.
Well,
and
yeah,
Colt is basically moved to the Czech Republic.
I mean, that's also true.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Winchester is whoever pays DuPont for the name. Marlin, I don't think does much in the way of manufacturing in Massachusetts.
Was Marlin in Massachusetts? I thought they were in Connecticut.
Maybe they were. I thought
Yeah, it was Connecticut, and they moved all of their operations while owned by Remington.
Yep.
Oh yeah. Now they were doing everything out of Ilion, New York.
Yep. And then of course,
that's right, Elon, New York.
Yeah, Ilion, not Elon, Ilion. And then of course, Ruger, Arizona, is one of their main places. I think also New Hampshire, isn't it?
Ruger's New Hampshire and Arizona, yes.
Yeah. And then, of course, SIG in New Hampshire.
Mm-hmm. And Germany.
Not really so much anymore.
Not the good stuff.
Well, by the good stuff, you mean the stuff for the military, yes. And I'm not talking handguns.
Well, I don't, do they make the my 365 was made in New Hampshire.
Yeah, I said not counting handguns.
Yeah.
The stuff that they make for the military.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, the good stuff.
The really good stuff.
Yep. What I'd like to see is FN open a U.S. facility in Tennessee.
And start making the FAL again.
Well, that was going to be my follow-up statement. Although DS Arms makes, I've heard, very good FALs. They're not FNs, but they're good. It's not like Century and their trained monkeys.
And I do have a little bit of love for the Scar 17.
The heavy?
Not necessarily the heavy. You can get one with a light barrel.
No, the common reference is the Scar Heavy is 308 and the Scar Light is 556.
Correct.
Yeah, we have... Last time I was in the store, we had 3 Scar 17 Heavies on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
Which, when I go back into the store, we might not have any because they just stay. But anyway, that was a positive story, I thought, to end the topic.
They go away fast, just like gun companies leaving the Northeast. Oh, speaking of the Northeast, David.
Yep. Well, here at home and close to home for me, the U.S. Supreme Court is actually going to hear a Second Amendment case. Since the plaintiff is the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association, and like me, Paloma Capana has ties to New York, she wanted to tell our listeners about the upcoming case.
I'm so happy to welcome back to the Assorted Calibers podcast, Paloma Capana. And Paloma, you were just on last talking about the NRA, and I had you on because you are a New York lawyer among your many other hats that you wear. And you know what? There's also another very important Second Amendment piece in New York law.
There is. So great cliffhanger coming up. New York State Rifle and Pistol Association, and it's going to be heard by the Supreme Court of the United States on November 3, 2021. Great website to mention too, folks, oyez.org. So OYEZ.org. Super website for United States Supreme Court cases. And this particular one is New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus the Superintendent of the New York State Police, a Justice of the New York State Supreme Court, and the Rensselaer County Licensing Officer. This is a case that examines, really for the first time since, well, going way back in New York law. New York, not a very gun-friendly state. It actually started regulating firearms back in 1785. So even before the New York State Constitution is passed, the New York State Legislature regulating firearms and gunpowder. In 1913, a law came into play called the Sullivan Law, and it set the statewide standard for issuance of licenses to carry firearms in public. You know, side joke, how otherwise are you going to even get your gun home from the gun store if you can't carry it in public? Anyway, it's a rather flat joke, but you know, the lawyers will mention from time to time of, well, this decision really makes sense. You have a right to defend yourself in your home. How'd you get the gun there in the first place?
And I must interrupt real quick, just because whenever the Sullivan Act comes up, I must mention the fact that Sullivan, I actually forget, what was his first name?
Oh, gosh. I'm going to draw a blank because you've asked me.
I didn't know if you knew off the top of your
New
head.
York State legislator.
I put you on the spot, but he had some allegations. Of course, I think nothing I can legally say is confirmed, but it's alleged that he had ties to organized crime in the city of New York. And one statement about the Sullivan Act was because of this discretion that we're about to discuss, it did allow people aligned with certain figures to go armed while disarming people aligned with other figures.
And that is definitely the theme of this segment. So New York State Senator Timothy Sullivan, don't you love Google? So Timothy Sullivan, and it's hilarious. Wikipedia describes him as a notoriously corrupt Tammany Hall Democratic politician. The phrasing of Tammany Hall is a little bit outdated, but people do still use it in Albany without question. So what we have as a standard in New York State is proper cause. An individual has to demonstrate proper cause to carry a firearm outside the home. There are a few exceptions under the heading shall be issued. For example, a messenger employed by a bank. But what has made this whole thing interesting in New York for 108 years is that proper cause is not defined in the law. So court after court for more than 100 years has actually tried to figure out how to phrase proper cause. And they've come up with things like, well, it would be okay to carry that handgun outside the home if it was going out for purposes of target practice or hunting. But where the drill down occurs, and listen to this language, I'm quoting it, I'm looking at it because it's so counterintuitive. It never really makes sense to me. Proper cause really requires your petitioner to demonstrate a special need for self-protection, distinguishable from that of the general community of persons engaged in the same profession. So it is not a generalized desire to carry a concealed weapon to protect one's person and property, and good moral character is not enough, nor is living or being employed in a high crime area. So judges have said point blank, it's for special people. It's for the special people. It's not for the general population. It's for the special people.
And again, noting that the also the need given cannot just be my desire to remain alive.
It cannot. That is correct. And where the case that really drives home, it cannot simply be your desire to stay alive, is a case called Kachalsky, that's spelled with a K, Kachalsky, versus the County of Westchester. That was decided in 2012, and it upheld the New York penal law provisions that we're just talking about right now. Gun famous attorney Alan Gura actually represented the plaintiffs, and he was hot off two big wins in the United States Supreme Court. Alan Gura was the attorney for Dick Heller in D.C. versus Heller. We all refer to it as the Heller decision. That was 2008. And he also represented the plaintiffs, including Otis McDonald, in the famous case of McDonald versus Chicago 2 years later, 2010. But in 2012, Gura and his plaintiffs suffer a scathing loss. One of those plaintiffs in Kachalsky was a transgender female, and her position requesting the firearm permit was rejected by the licensing officer because she did not report any type of threat to her own safety anywhere. So remember how it got phrased up above. Demonstrate a special need for self-protection distinguishable from that of the general community. Apparently, even to a downstate licensing officer in 2012 in the state of New York, near New York City, being a transgender female was no different a safety risk than the general community. This judge apparently never having referred to FBI crime statistics and reports.
Just outrageous.
I know it does kind of leave you speechless, right? Doesn't it?
Yep.
Part of me is like, oh, we can't have silence on the air, right? Fill it in. But it does leave you speechless, because what Kachalsky did was chill so many people from applying for their permits. I mean, it just was talked about in New York. The average Joe on the street who would come to places that I was speaking, and I was out on circuit probably every week, if not several times a week, would come up to me and say, well, I can't do it. It's not even worth my time. It's impossible. The system that evolved under the Sullivan Law of 1913 means that in the state of New York, every single county developed its own application process, elected judges. So in the state of New York, your judges who review permit application appeals, it's first going to go to a local county level judge. You did start to develop a very uneven system. So after the SAFE Act passed in 2011, you start to see more pronounced decisions and even statements by some county sheriffs, statements by some licensing officers, statements by some county clerks, statements by some county executives saying, we're not going to do this anymore, right? If a person applies for the handgun permit and they go through everything that they have to go through, so you're talking about a criminal background check with the FBI, the New York State Division of Criminal Justice Services, the New York State Police, a mental health history, including with the New York State Department of Mental Hygiene, moral character, because every county requires you to include references of people, generally 3, themselves already permit holders in good standing who have known you for a minimum of a number of years, who do get personally interviewed during this process, and fingerprints. The Monroe County, New York application process approaches 30 pages worth of information that you provide, including blanket HIPAA waivers to all medical providers, including for women, their gynecologists. I kid you not.
Again, outrageous.
I mean, we're not talking about a shabby system here, right? This is not as though it's just handing out handguns on street corners in the state of New York, at least not to the people who would qualify as law-abiding gun owners, right? We're going to skip the whole conversation about criminals having access to firearms. We all know that. The audience of Assorted Calibers podcast already knows that. What we're talking about here are law-abiding people applying for their concealed carry permit in the state of New York. And that essentially, when you boil down all the really fancy legal language, it comes down to, are you one of the special people? So fortunately, the United States Supreme Court has agreed to hear this case. I have never in my life seen a case with as many amicus briefs, friends of the court briefs, as this case. It's unbelievable. If you go, ladies and gentlemen, to the United States Supreme Court website and you pull up this case, again, it's New York State Rifle and Pistol Association, on the docket for oral arguments November 3rd, 2021. It just goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on. Everybody in America who can get an attorney wants to put in their 2 cents to the Supreme Court, because if this could be overturned, it would be huge. It truly would be huge. It would have a nationwide repercussion in our divided nation of the pro-gun, anti-gun, because it would finally set a standard that was uniform concerning handgun permits, potentially. So we did have Congressman, John Katko from the state of New York, who had proposed a 50-state carry bill. In other words, if you get yourself a permit in one state that complies with at least, the following minimum standards for getting a permit, your permit is valid in 50 states, just like a driver's license.
Yep.
That bill shot down, never went anywhere. Logical, of course, right? What other thing do we have that we can't do interstate in this manner, especially after you've done FBI background checks and left fingerprints, for heaven's sakes? But this case could actually rock the boat. So stay tuned. This is NYSRPA's 3rd major case in just the last 10 years. So it had the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Andrew Cuomo back when the SAFE Act passed. That was in 2013. And it had also New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus the City of New York, which I would just quickly point out to listeners is a 2020 case. The New York State Rifle and Pistol successfully got the Supreme Court to accept the case, and the City of New York quickly passed a statute that made everything moot. And the U.S. Supreme Court said, okay, goodbye. Psht, we don't need to hear your case. We're not going to issue a ruling. It's fixed, right? Now, mind you, Justice Kavanaugh, Justice Alito, Justice Gorsuch, Justice Thomas, they saw through the political chicanery of that in a heartbeat. And they made sure to write, some concurring opinions. Although Justice Thomas is in part dissenting, he's always on his own track. He votes the right way, and then it's like, what are you thinking? But so there was some progress there. So listen, with any luck, this case becomes what we all cite in triple: Heller, McDonald, NYSRPA. That would be fabulous. That would be a good day for gun rights advocates.
So one final question that I think would be good to ask you in your legal expertise. I mean, clearly when Heller and McDonald went through, it doesn't mean that we're, buying machine guns in gas stations. It was
hell no.
It was overall, it was a very important ruling, but at the same time, it's also a very, very narrow ruling.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, in some sense, what Heller and McDonald as a pair, so both decisions taken together, what it accomplishes is getting the Second Amendment a seat at the table. Mm-hmm. So that the United States Supreme Court says, listen, we have the First Amendment. Guess what? We also have a Second Amendment, and we have a fourth and a fifth. There's a third in there somewhere. I can't even remember. Is that the amendment that's never had a case, the quartering of soldiers?
Quartering
but anyway,
troops in the home.
Right. But the issue really becomes, in some sense, okay, we got a seat at the table that many did not want us to have. Do we have any elbow room? Mm-hmm. I mean, can you actually exercise that right, or is it a static thing that essentially only applies at the point somebody is breaking the plane of your personal residence when you have nowhere to retreat safely out of, right? And I'm obviously oversimplifying things hugely here, but do you not have a right to be safe when you're sitting at the diner? Do you not have a right to be safe when you're dropping your child off at school? I think there are parents on those difficult issues who themselves, even if just quietly, will have wondered, should I have gotten my permit?
Yeah.
What if I had not had my, or in other cases, what if I had not had my handgun locked securely in the trunk of my car while entering school grounds on a particular day because I'm following the rules? Mm-hmm.
Well, I like to say that Heller and McDonald really addressed the keep part of the right to keep and bear arms. And I'm seeing this as definitely much more of a discussion of the right to bear those arms, the right to carry arms. But in your legal opinion, I will say I'm a bit of a Pollyanna, so I see that if this does lose, it wouldn't be the end of the world, only because the states that are may issue have been may issue for long before any of this started, and the state and all other states that have been moved forward have turned to shall issue permits, and I don't necessarily see them going back on that because there just hasn't been a precedent on it.
Not currently, but I think the challenge is, do we know how to win? Mm-hmm. If we do prevail in this case, and it's a strong, solid opinion, my prediction is gun rights then catapult to a hysteria akin to abortion. Because I think that anti-gun groups will then view that decision as the one they need to bring down. So right now there's sort of this uncomfortable balance, if you will. So someone like me can leave at the state of New York and move to North Carolina. And if I wanted to open carry, I'm good to go, right? We'll go this fall. We'll get our permits. Why? Because we have a 40-acre property that is 100% wild, backing up to a military base that is little used as compared to the Cherry Point. The property that we have in Atlantic is much more rural. And I really would like to have some snake shot with me. Mm-hmm. Because we got poisonous snakes down here, and guess what? They love water, and they'll even skirt across the surface of it. So you see it when you drive down east, right? You see snakes in broad daylight that are like 4 foot long. So it would be handy to have that tool, as part of what I'm doing. And I don't want to have to be in that position. It's part of why I'm so proud to be in North Carolina, is when I get into my car, then to leave the property, I'm going to take all the safety measures that are reasonable and appropriate, and I'm going to drive home, and I'm going to bring my firearm into my home, and I don't have to worry on those 40 miles about getting pulled over and arrested simply for being a firearms owner who wants to be safe at 5'3", when I'm out in the woods. So I think that we would, yes, see this lovely cultural shift for us, a little sigh of relief. But I almost think that if NYSRPA prevails at SCOTUS, our workload just went up.
Yeah.
So I think you might see small towns, cities doing what they just did in Texas, passing statutes with no purpose other than to create a situation where there's a case that they try to get to SCOTUS to then overturn a NYSRPA victory.
Oh, wow.
Because they're not going to like it, right? Mm-hmm. A 50-state even standard for handgun permits, it's not going to go over well.
well, that is certainly an interesting perspective that I had not even considered. You have me flabbergasted, Paloma.
Well, that's because, if you will, I am talking to so many people these days who are missing the time they had off under President Trump. And I keep saying to people, but that's while the other side is scheming. You don't get time off because we think we have the majority somewhere, anywhere, or we've passed a sanctuary cities law, or, well, I have my permit, so I'm okay, and you don't worry about the other guy or gal whose application was denied to question, well, what happened here, right? So we've really got to, go ahead and have a cupcake, but don't be eating the whole cake, because the workload, I think, will shift to a much higher plane.
Well, this is why we have your unique perspective on the Assorted Calibers podcast. Thank you so much, Paloma Capana.
You're welcome. And to everybody in NYSRPA, including Executive Director Tom King, I'm giving a big shout out to you for your fortitude and your strength in doing the fundraising necessary and sticking with these cases. They take time. So don't view my messaging here as, a rain shower on a parade. It's really more to say to our team, right? Don't go wandering off the field, because it will make us a moving target. And so be ready for success. Success in politics means defend the castle.
Now, for me, as I mentioned, this was fairly close to home, I'm a life member of NYSRPA. I actually contribute to the newsletter, The Bullet magazine. And I know a lot of the people. Paloma mentioned Tom King. I've known Tom for years. And I also recently was a guest on an episode of Handgun Radio where we talked about New York and New York City gun laws, as well as, I forget the episode numbers, where I did segments on them for Assorted Calibers podcast.
You covered a lot of stuff in your first segments with the show. And that was, you will hear in that interview that I was just gobsmacked on several occasions on that, on just I'm still amazed on the, well, as I was telling David before the show started, I'm like, I don't remember what I do remember what I was thinking when Paloma told me that stuff, which is just 404 file not found. I couldn't compute. But while I was listening to that, because I recorded that a couple weeks ago before I went on vacation, and I just re-listened to it to refresh myself, and I just hear that, and I'm just like, Man, even with David,
they do what?
Yeah, even with David talking as much, and like I said, we just recently did that Handgun Radio where you talked about New York gun laws, and I live in Massachusetts where our laws are awful. I'm still surprised that we do this to human beings.
Yeah, well, as she mentioned, New York started passing gun control laws before all of the colonies signed the Constitution. Remember that? Yeah, and then I did think it was funny that neither of you remembered Tim Sullivan's first name. Google is a wonderful thing.
Google is wonderful.
Yeah, and she mentioned Rensselaer County. I lived in Rensselaer County for 12 years, and I knew both County Clerk Frank Marola, and the pistol clerk, whose name really is Charlie Daniels. Nice guy.
There's a park named after him near me.
Yep. Now, before Charlie, the pistol clerk was Joyce Sullivan, and she was a sweetheart. But yeah, people think New York is this firearm desert, and really it's the metro areas. Once you get outside of those, lot of guns, lot of gun owners. I mean, to the point that Rensselaer County has a person whose job 4 days a week, full time, is processing the pistol purchase coupons.
Well, and part of and that just further goes with the May issue. Basically, turns into either issue for everybody or issue for nobody.
Yeah, and in New York State, that's determined at the county level, or in some cases, the city level, a large city. So Rensselaer County was much, much better about that than Albany, for example. One of the things that's really important if you're reviewing this case with the whole show good cause aspect is, well, as Martin Luther King Jr. said, a right delayed is a right denied. Mm-hmm. Under New York state law, and I've mentioned this repeatedly both on this show and Handgun Radio, is under New York state law, the approval or reason of denial for a pistol license application must occur within 6 months. Now, administratively, it was decided that clock does not start ticking until the paperwork hits the judge's desk. So the months it languishes in the inbox don't count. When I lived in the city of Albany back in the early aughts and got my pistol license, it took about 4 months all told, which was very good. Talking to friends in New York in the pre-COVID times, 2019, they were looking at 12 to 14 months.
And gee, it would be nice if the state decided that, anything with a deadline on your end, the clock doesn't start until we can prove that you've actually seen that you need to do the thing.
Yeah, well, you do all the paperwork, you submit it. If there's anything missing, that gets administratively kicked back fairly quickly.
Oh, of course.
If they're waiting for the judge to review it, well, until it actually gets to the top of the judge's inbox, it's not actually. And that is part of what this lawsuit is all about, is the May issue, the show good cause. In New York pistol license application, you have to get 4 people to attest to your good character. And depending on where in New York you live, they may get a form letter they have to fill out. They may get a visit from the police. Either the state, county, or local law enforcement officers will come and interview that person just to make sure that you're okay to exercise your constitutional rights.
Let's be honest, just to give them an extra opportunity to say no.
Yep. Now, when it comes to fee structure, it's better than some states, worse than others. It's when I left New York, it was the application fee was $105, and it was for a lifetime. There was no renewal process at that. It gets recertified every 5 years, but there currently is not a fee. But it's one more thing after another to make it complicated so that people don't bother, so that the culture will die.
Well, let's get into something a little bit lighter. And I mean,
well, that depends. It's lighter depending on what treatments you use.
Yes. Well, I mean, we could say it was darker because my beloved shoulder holster slipped its mortal coil. And David, you were nice enough to say, "Hey, would you mind shipping me the corpse so that I can do a postmortem?" So I did do that along with some Lipton tea. People who listen to the blooper reel have heard the shenanigans surrounding the Lipton tea that Xander bought for me initially.
You son of a beep.
So I said, you know what, David, could you please do? I've got it. It was a few years ago. It was actually at the last NRA annual meeting.
Which may very well be the last NRA annual meeting.
Yes, at least the one with an expo, because they just had one. But
sort of
exactly. Stephen, check out the Reload podcast. Stephen Kachalsky gives an after action report of it that is quite good.
Even the Cliff Notes version that he provides in the newsletter wets your whistle.
It's an exclusive because he was literally the only press member there. So
anyway,
but at the last expo, my shoulder holster was showing severe wear, and so I said, you know what, I should pick up a new one. So I had a replacement immediately. So I have a replacement now, and I asked David, could you do a segment so I know how to better take care of this holster so that it will live far longer than my previous one did.
Hi, and welcome to Gun Lovers and Other Strangers. After Weer'd's shoulder harness failed following more than a decade of loyal service, he asked me to do a segment on leather care. According to Weer'd, all he did was wear the shoulder holster harness and pretty much nothing else. With proper care, leather can last indefinitely. In my collection, I have some World War II vintage holsters and pack straps that are nearly as supple as when they were made. I know people who have leather goods that are even older. So what's involved in maintaining leather, and what supplies are needed? The answer is not a lot and nothing too complicated. There are several important steps that should be followed in leather care. Cleaning when necessary and airing out and conditioning the item regularly. A schedule can help here. Two of the biggest enemies of leather are getting too dry and getting too wet. Leather contains certain oils and fats that are necessary to maintain flexibility and strength. When leather gets wet, those elements can be flushed out or diluted, leaving the leather stiff and inflexible when it dries. This can lead to cracking, which is fatal. Once leather develops cracks, there's not much that can be done to preserve it for further use. If leather does get wet, blot it dry as soon as possible and allow it to air dry naturally. Once dry, apply a leather conditioner. Never use an artificial heat source such as a hairdryer or radiator to dry leather. At best, this will cause shrinking, at worst, cracking. When leather gets dirty, one of the first things to do is wipe it down with a soft brush or a dry cloth to remove any loose dirt. Pay special attention to seams where dirt and debris can hide. Then use a proper leather cleaner to remove any deeper soil or stains. In a pinch, you can use a bar of moisturizing soap to clean leather. Rub the bar on a washcloth dampened, not wet, just damp, with warm water, and gently wipe it along the leather to remove any dirt. Make sure to wipe off all the soap residue as soon as possible. A reasonably good homemade surface cleaner / conditioner can be made from a mixture of olive oil and white vinegar. Shake them together in a spray bottle, lightly mist the leather, and wipe clean with a dry cloth. With something like a holster or belt that gets exposed to sweat and body oils, an additional option is using a steam cleaner to help disinfect and remove buildup and salt stains from the leather. Never immerse leather items in water, and obviously don't run them through the washing machine or dryer, nor should you iron leather. The next part of maintenance is conditioning. The purpose of conditioning is, again, to help leather maintain its supple and flexible nature without saturating with oil. After leather gets wet or cleaned, and on a regular schedule of every 3 to 6 months regardless, use a leather conditioner to help replenish the leather's natural oils. Depending on the type of leather product and its exposure to the elements, a variety of preservatives and conditioners can be used. This list includes items as varied as Vaseline, Lanolin, Beeswax, mineral oil, olive oil, mink oil, Neatsfoot oil, and linseed oil. These items are used as is or mixed with other ingredients. The Picard Company has offered a wide variety of leather care products for over 100 years. Their classic leather dressing is particularly well regarded, considered number one, so they must be doing something right. There are also many different homemade leather treatments. One such is a mixture of 1 part white vinegar to 2 parts linseed oil. Apply a light coating with a soft cloth, let the item rest for 12 hours, then buff the leather. Another homemade option is 1 part beeswax, 1 part cocoa butter, and 2 parts almond oil. Blend them together on medium heat until the oils are melted. After it cools, massage it into the leather with your fingers before polishing with a dry cloth. Leather is a natural material and very porous. It can never be completely waterproof, but there are some surface treatments to help protect leather from moisture. There are a variety of commercial products on the market, from aerosols to gels, that can help protect leather if it gets exposed to water. An option that can be made at home is a beeswax-based cream. Beeswax is a natural waterproofing solution and can be fairly effective at waterproofing leather. Take 1 cup of extra virgin olive oil and 2 ounces of beeswax. Pour the extra virgin olive oil into a glass jar, break the beeswax into pieces, and add that to the jar. Place the jar in a pan of cold water. Carefully warm the pan on a stove, stir the mixture until the beeswax has completely melted, and blend it with the olive oil. Remove the pan from heat, carefully remove the hot jar from the pan, continue to stir the wax oil mixture until it cools and stiffens. This can take up to 20 minutes. After the mixture has cooled and stiffened, spot test the cream on an inconspicuous area of the leather. Make sure to begin with clean leather. Apply the cream with your fingers, gently buffing the leather surface as you go. This will need to be repeated to build up the protective coating. Make sure to pay particular attention to seams. With shoes, this especially includes where the upper meets the sole. Those are your leather damage talking points and a few rebuttal techniques to combat them. Hey, Weer'd, you know why thieves prefer leather armor? 'Cause it's made out of hide.
Oh, Jesus, David.
That about wraps up this segment. If you have any questions for me or suggestions for future segments or a comment on a past segment, please post them on the Assorted Calibers Podcast Facebook or MeWe pages, and Aaron or Weer'd will make sure I get them. I'm also a contributor on the Blue Collar Prepping blog, which can be found at bluecollarprepping.blogspot.com. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. I'm David, and this is Gun Lovers and Other Strangers.
And by the way, I put link to the in the show notes. David, you didn't supply it, but you also did essentially more or less this segment on blue collar prepping. And so if you would be better to read it, or for future reference, it is just so much easier to read something than listen to a podcast over and over again. And so,
especially with some of the leather care recipes that they're in print there. They're in the show notes. But the format on blue collar prepping, I think, is a
and there's a picture of one of the broken ends from my from my shoulder gear.
I did not identify the source of that leather.
Nope.
I did not out.
So yeah, but thank you so much for all that information, David. Because I don't want my new one to have that.
It's leather. Like I said, leather can last for generations with proper care. It can last for years with poor care.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to have to try some of that on some of my leather sheaths that got severe water damage a number of years ago from an apartment fire.
Yeah. One of the nice things about leather knife sheaths is they tend not to flex much unless they have like a thumb snap.
Right, yeah.
If they do have the thumb snap, that's where you'll see the cracks forming. And once you see those cracks, it's pretty much done. You can't hit that.
Right, but I've had some that have shrunk, etc., as they were drying out after getting thoroughly soaked with water.
Yeah, and that's just it's a couple of things. One, as I mentioned in the segment, it is the either natural or tanning provided fats and oils to help keep the leather supple. Mm-hmm. But also, as it dries, the leather will tighten. It'll basically shrink due to the departure of those elements. And if you take some care and you use the proper items, you can get some of that shape back, as long as the leather has not been permanently damaged.
Right.
And if it's not cracked, it's usually salvageable. So take care of your skins, folks. An animal died for you to have that. Show some respect.
And we work hard to take care of our listeners and especially those who support us on Patreon. And so thank you very much to all of you. And if you are not a Patreon supporter of the show, go to patreon.com/Assorted Calibers Podcast to sign up. And it's really more of a store than a support group. I kind of don't like the support group method. Like I'm not begging you.
Well, I mean, it's a support group in the psychological sense.
Yes, I'm not begging you for help. I'm asking you to buy some products, and you can get the show early, but you can also get the blooper reels. The blooper reels are the crowd favorite.
If you enjoy the little stingers at the end of my segments, those are all culled from the blooper reels.
That's right. David's been having a whole lot of fun mining the blooper reels. I really appreciate that, David.
It's very time-consuming, though.
And, of course, we have the ACP Film Tracks, which is mostly me and these two chuckleheads watching movies. And this
I cannot recommend Lamageddon enough.
Yeah.
It is, an hour and 5 minutes or something like that?
And
it was less than an hour of us laughing.
Yeah, you can watch the movie on its own, and the movie is pretty bonkers. But watching listening to it with the film track going as well, it also includes the track of me when I think I was going to die. I was laughing so hard that I'm like, I think I felt something burst in my head. Something may have burst on my head, but I got better.
Yeah. Which, of course, just made us laugh that much harder.
Yeah.
Well, there was also that one part where you were laughing so hard you couldn't inhale. Mm-hmm. Or that might have been all of us. I think that was all of us.
Yeah. So, yeah. And of course, also, we have the ACP Mag Dump, which is a bonus show that is unscripted, uncensored, and much more freeform.
Unexpurgated.
Yes.
I just like that word.
Yes.
There are naughty words during it.
Yes.
And of course, you can help out the show without expending money by if you are one of those people who use Apple products. You can go to Apple Podcasts and you can rate us, and also you can subscribe to us on all the podcast platforms out there. You know, for the Android users like myself, subscribe to us. It'll pop up in your feed.
And if you like the show, share it with your friends. Mm-hmm. If you don't like the show, share it with your enemies.
And if you want more of me, I have a blog. It's weerdworld.com, and I'm on Handgun Radio with David. David is in I think the latest episode is David.
And I look forward to coming back for the Colt Smith & Wesson 1917 discussion.
Oh yeah, that'll be a good one. Ooh. And David, where can people find more of you?
Well, I can be found regularly right here on Assorted Calibers Podcast, but as was mentioned, I'm also a contributor on the Blue Collar Prepping blog, which can be found at bluecollarprepping.blogspot.com, and occasionally, and hopefully more often, on Handgun Radio.
And Oddball, when was the last time you wrote on your blog?
Yeah.
One of the ingredients that's good for leather will also be good for burns.
Oh, that's good. Because I've got at least as many posts that I need to write up for gunscarstech.com as I do for here, and of course you can always find me in the ACP group on Facebook and MeWe.
Yeah, MeWe's that Facebook downage really has done a bump to MeWe. So MeWe has become a much more interesting place than it was before. So if you haven't gone to MeWe yet, do it. It's like Facebook, but it's not awful.
Yeah. Although one of the interesting things is after the Facebook down and MeWe exploding, I got a whole bunch of friend requests from people who, when I go to look at who is this person, most of their posts are adult in nature. And I'm not sure what to make of that.
And of course, you are currently listening to Nate Spencer, who does our lovely music.
Thank you, Nate.
So most episodes, we have me with Erin Paulette. In the absence of her, I have to bring on these two losers in attempts to even get like a fraction of it, and I believe we accomplished me hosting the show with one of Aaron Paulette's toenails.
More or less.
So
our leather care process is assorted, and so is our podcast.
It's a non sequitur. Good night, everybody.
Good night, folks.
Our foot care regime is assorted, and so is our podcast.
Let's go ride bikes.